Hello and welcome to the EMS Handoff podcast. This is David, and along with my co-host Bradley Dean and Eric McCullough, we are your source for all things EMS. Tonight we're going to be nice. We have a distinguished guest. You all that suffer through Bradley being our guest last week, we're coming back to something good and fulfilling today. So our distinguished guest bringing a topic that many of us have. This has been a constant topic. About EMS and how we do things. So we're going to kick it over to Eric McCullough first and see how Nashville has been treating him over the last week.
Good. I don't have any complaints here. Been working at the pediatric clinic. I will tell you that our COVID numbers, since we haven't really done that since we've been doing this podcast, but we're not seeing any kids anymore. That's kind of cool. One of the clinics I work at and I moonlight at, we just don't see the numbers anymore, so that's nice. Gardens in the ground. Still got I do have a blood oath against the squirrels still, but now my son watched a video of this engineer who used squirrel catapults. So now he wants to build squirrel houses for them to eat walnuts and figure out how to put a gauntlet for them to go through. So yeah,
I've seen those. His entire backyard is basically this whole maze. And if they do happen to get to it, it's like some ridiculous, like it slings them off into the. I've seen those.
Yeah, now he's got in his head, his old 6-year-old head, this is what we're going to do. So I'm like, well, I can't say no. So we'll probably do something.
Only because you really want to do it. Don't even lie about that.
I don't want to encourage any more squirrels anywhere near my property, but I guess while he's not looking, I can take a few pop shots at him.
Any TWRA officers that are listening, Eric McCullough is over in Middle Tennessee.
It wouldn't be. It's like those little salt rifles, the little salt. Yeah, it's nothing. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt mosquitoes. It's not going to hurt those things.
All right. Well, let's kick it over to the other side and go to Bradley Dean and see if, he's dealing with rogue squirrels, or how are you doing, Bradley?
I'm doing great. Just a squirrel in your world. It's been great in North Carolina this week. It was EMS week. We were busy. We did agricultural rescue. We had several other classes going on this week. Spent a lot of time on the farm. So we had fun. And I got a little sunburnt, but I'm good.
Oh, for shame. You got to make sure that SPF 90, you got the ginger on the other side of you as on mine, and he's really got to put up the sun protection factor there a little bit. All right. So before we introduce our guest this evening, we're going to talk about our podcast, part of the Journal of Emergency Medical Services. They've been a tremendous partner to the EMS Handoff podcast. And while we remain your source for all things EMS and podcast first, they've been an industry leader for many years. So please make sure to go by and check out their website. Also find them on Google, Spotify, and Apple to listen to not only all of our episodes, but also all of our podcast partners that are on there as well, making up the EMS Today podcast. Also, we'd like to make sure to introduce the EMS Handoff apparel line with our podcast partner, the Pursuit Company, creating an awesome gear line. I believe Eric's got the black on there. I've got our hoodie. Don't forget to check out our new Keep Back 500 Feet podcast line that just dropped last week as well. PursuitOutfitters.com/EMS Handoff to find your apparel of choice. And we have spent a lot of time with bad dad jokes, and it's time to get us on point, Bradley. So let's go ahead and introduce our guest for this week.
So our guest this week is Nancy Magee. She's been active in EMS for over 20 years. She's been a self-employed business owner and consultant for 25 years. And as a volunteer EMT, career AEMT, instructor, field supervisor, and director of marketing and client relations for an EMS Management Service Organization. She combines marketing savvy and management perspective with a volunteer's heart. Her workshop series, Redesigning Volunteer EMS, a volunteer survival guide, has been presented nationwide and is aimed at helping volunteer EMS agencies overcome physical, leadership, and recruitment and retention challenges. She is the author of Redesigning Volunteer EMS, which is featured on EMS1.com. Her blogs on volunteerism, professionalism, and ethics can be found on her website at medictrainingsolutions.org. She's a dynamic and passionate educator, subject matter expert, and advocate for EMS volunteers, and presents clinical content geared toward rural BLS providers at EMS conferences across the country. She's a Connecticut native, but she now resides in rural Louisiana in the funnel of where all the hurricanes go, and teaches EMR, EMT, and continuing education classes for rural first responders and volunteers. Nancy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I just need to know who you, whether it was you or somebody else, who wrote that bio, because that's awesome and I need something like that. Just saying.
I wrote it.
All right.
I actually hate talking about myself, so I hate when people read it. But
that's everybody's like, hey, I need your bio. And I'm like, I am David. Here you go. And yeah, so right there with you. So we're going to go ahead and let you introduce kind of the topic or the feel for our conversation this evening. So what are you thinking?
So I think what we're going to talk about is how rural and even, suburban or metro agencies need to get more involved in the community in terms of public education in order to help with prevention and having a healthier community. And there's a tremendous opportunity in doing this for us to introduce people who have no idea what EMS is to the world of EMS, to gain their trust, and to talk to people in a non-emergent, non-scary situation and kind of bring them into the fold. And also, we love our emergencies, but as healthcare providers, prevention is something that we have kind of put to the side, and we really need to work a little bit harder on that.
I think you're absolutely spot on, and you've already kind of hit the home run. So we're just going to figure out how we actually get to doing that. So as you kind of mentioned, let me kind of take a turn real quick. So a lot of times what I hear when I'm talking about the growth and professionalism of of EMS, what we see a lot of times is, well, law enforcement has this and fire has this. And coming from the fire background, I'm going to kind of talk because I think, again, you've already hit that home run. And I think what we see a lot of times on the fire side is basically what you're talking about is that, many years ago, they had massive amounts of fire going on, commercial, residential area, and throughout the years, through building codes, through new materials, through public education, those numbers have come down to the point now they're jumping into the realm of doing EMS first response. They're doing hazmat. They're doing rescue. They're doing all this other stuff because the primary stuff that they have been doing for the fire response has actually been cut. And so that's actually what you're talking about now is how do we do this to where we have a better community while understanding what EMS is, right?
Well, I think we have to take advantage of social media for one. And in small communities, I think everything is tied together. Funding, public relations, recruitment and retention, they're all part of the same package. And we can use the ability to teach simple things like stroke recognition, sepsis recognition, CPR. I have a list of about 20 different things that the average EMT could teach a group of people in about 10 minutes, for lay people. And if that is an ongoing thing and it builds trust and it brings people back, to the agency, a trust begins to develop there, and it shows that the empathy of the agency, not just the bag them and drag them to the hospital. And all, that's the basis of all relationships is empathy. You cannot have that. And if you want to have the trust of the community, you need to prove your value. And your value is in showing them your knowledge, that you're not just driving people to the hospital. And there's no reason. I have high school EMRs that from day one, they learn, when we teach you this, I want you to go home and teach this to your mother, your father, whoever, And that exponentially teaches that many more people, especially here where there's very little access to healthcare. It teaches that many more people in the community what to look for and how to take care of themselves.
So one of the things we kind of get built in, so you kind of referenced there, basically this is a job that anybody can do. It doesn't have to be a service director or a public information officer or a white shirt, gold badge, 8-hour office person. This is something that anybody within the profession can do. We're basically identifying that. Now, let's go ahead and start from the coordination point. So what is it that the community needs to know about EMS and the role that we have for public health?
Well, actually, I was talking to Kelly Grayson, is my partner, the other day, and we have these odd conversations. And I said, EMS really wants to be Batman. Come in the dark, come in with all your cool stuff. We want everybody to know how exciting it is and that we can do all these things. But we really need to be Bruce Wayne most of the time, taking care of our community, giving them the benefit of, not Bruce Wayne's money, but of our knowledge and of our experience. And I think it's fairly simple to do no matter the size of the community. And when I talk about rural providers, and especially EMTs who don't do a lot of calls, if they have the opportunity to teach something simple, like whether it's, stroke recognition, they are going to become more and more confident in their ability to recognize it too. So it's just a win-win-win, to get that kind of ball rolling.
So it's something that we can coordinate. But you can also empower your providers. So, one of the things we talk about is obviously we want a coherent and consistent message that is going out. So trying to have multiple things funneled, but, so we have EMT Nancy that has come to our service and is highly passionate about stroke recognition. It's like, hey, I've noticed that we've had a lot of strokes in the area. Do you mind if I put together a program and you can put together materials, whether, like you mentioned, a training class, social media posts, or engagement through our media partners out there to get that word out, right? That's that empowerment and giving that. It's like, hey, you're in the rural community. You don't have as many calls, or as you mentioned, the EMT that may not be attending quite as much. And that could be that way of bringing that individual in, empowering them, and basically that ends up to a retention queue as well.
Exactly. If you take your new members and you put them in charge of diabetic information, or putting together some kind of a social event where maybe you're having some kind of a cookout or whatever's going on, pancake breakfast, and there's 10 minutes. I keep thinking about, and now I'm dating myself, but there used to be the more you know with the star that went across the screen, those PSAs. And that's the kind of thing that I think should happen. And if you have it in the same place most of the time, whether it's a senior center, the high school, the town hall, your own agency, so that becomes a hub of where people go to when they want to know something about healthcare. You can keep all kinds of things available to them on every subject and empower, especially your new people, to be a part of your agency that is helping the community every single day, by learning about these things and creating. I think when you trust people with that, you create a natural urge in them to want to be better at it. I'm going to find out more about it because somebody's going to ask me questions, more so than just, sitting around with a canned speech or whatever, and have them run it by the education officer or whatever. So it's not woo or anything crazy like that thrown in there, but it's very simple. I mean, this is the stuff that we teach, EMRs, we teach our EMR class pretty much the same way as our EMT class. So it's basically geared towards the same thing that lay people can do.
I like the idea of what you're talking about. This idea of like extending ownership to people who would be considered junior in capacity. So, and I think that kind of gets them into what they're going to do, what the expectations are in the real world too. I mean, in EMS, we are small group units. Yes, we do function as bigger groups and stuff, but generally it's group of, mostly two or three people. And so I could see stacking like EMR or high school students, EMRs, like, the typical like blood pressure checks at Walmart or something like that, just some sort of community outreach project and be like, here you go. I mean, I think of, I wasn't a Boy Scout or Eagle Scout or anything like that, but I know they always look for projects and stuff like that for that. So I think it's good to have that ownership and to have that, I think Jocko calls it decentralized leadership, or decentralized command, where basically you're allowing somebody to have some leadership and education oversight, and it's non-punitive. It's not going to be a huge deal when it comes to like you're not educating them on cardiac drugs. You're just doing basic first aid. So this is a good first step. Do you have a place where they have like a template of like what that looks like?
Mm-hmm. Well, when I do some workshops for volunteers, and I have a whole bunch of stuff, and I've just told them, I put things up on my social media. All you have to do is share it, line it all up so that once a week or every couple of days, something is coming up that people will look for, and they only have a short attention span if you're using social media. But if you can say, well, if you'd like to know more about this, we're going to have a session on, diabetes, anything that sepsis, anything that you could think of that people, addiction, anything that people will have an interest in, because almost everybody the main things that we deal with in EMS, almost every single person at least knows somebody that has had that kind of a problem. Whereas only I think statistically 1 out of 10 or 11 people will ever use an ambulance in their life. So you have to make it relevant to the public, and then you become their go-to people, and they start to recognize that you're not just ambulance drivers, and that you're educated and you can help them, and that you really care about your community and the health of your community. And this kind of started out with, and I'm going to get crucified on this, but for example, when Mayor de Blasio said the work is different, everybody lost their minds, and they put up the little things on Facebook and the solidarity stuff. And my response to that was, why doesn't he know? Why doesn't he know what EMS does? Who's going to tell him? So instead of getting mad about it, let's educate people. If I'm the mayor of a city, I don't necessarily know what every single department does at the ground level. So I think it's our responsibility. We have to own it, as you said. And I think, and as you're talking about leadership, I'm a big believer, especially in small agencies, of collective leadership. It gets rid of a lot of drama. It brings people into the fold. It makes them feel engaged. Because if you work in a small agency and your only satisfaction comes from those life and death calls, you're going to not be happy pretty quickly. So if you can see that when you go out and people thank you and ask you, which doesn't happen on a regular EMS call, I think you would see a lot of increased morale. You would see people that are interested in joining because it doesn't seem threatening at that point. There's just so many wins for a simple thing that you can do that doesn't even cost any money.
Well, and I think you make a very valid point. And a lot of people, I think the most public example of that is the one that you mentioned is, with Mayor de Blasio from New York. But that's really many different leaders. As I had a conversation a couple of years ago with the state legislator, one of the key things is there was a reference to a nurse, and he made a quick comment. He goes, "You all don't do the same things," and so I had the opportunity to go through about a 3 to 4 minute conversation with him about what happens in the back of the ambulance. And his comment was, "I had no idea you all could do that kind of thing." So that really talks about this engagement, really at all levels, but knowing what and advocating for ourselves. In our profession, because one of the things is you're not going to know everything the fire department does or everything that law enforcement's in, but they're conversant in the majority of things that get done. They know they fight fires, they know they do some medical response, they do some rescue. Get into the weeds, they may not know, but this is those kind of things are really big area. But in addition to that, the constituents that person is voted in by or votes these people in, they don't know, and therefore they're not asking that question. So it's unique that you're kind of talking about this. And when we take a look at this, one of the key things that you mentioned earlier is a funding issue. This is stuff that can be done with really no additional funding, but yet could help the community out tremendously. So if you were to come in, and we're just going to put you in XYZ ambulance service in any town USA, we're going to say kind of a suburban area, not necessarily urban, but not necessarily rural either. And I'm going to sneeze real quick. Going to edit that part out. The first thing when you come in, how do you approach this? How do you get the buy-in from your membership?
The buy-in from the membership or the buy-in from the public?
Let's start with the buy-in of your membership first.
I think you have to really approach people in a way that says, we all want to make a difference. We need to do something that can help us show what our impact is that people may not be aware of. And we're going to put you in teams, okay? And we're going to give you a topic, and somebody will help you with this. And maybe you can rotate out or pick the thing that's the most important to you. Your grandmother died of Alzheimer's. You want to talk about that. You have a diabetic child. You want to talk about that. In 10 minutes, how can you educate the public? We're going to put you out in front of them and make them the hero of that story. And I think people want to be recognized. They want somebody to let recognize that they have the knowledge. And I think especially for new people who are coming out of class a lot of times with more knowledge than people that have been there for 20 years, that have been to the same old refresher class for 20 years. No. So give them an opportunity to talk about maybe some new ideas or some new information without it being a threat to the older people. Because at that point, they can sit back and say, what do you know? I learned something. It doesn't happen on a call. So I think that would be the way that I would go about it. You have to make it relevant to them, and you have to make them involved in the decision-making process. Don't give somebody something they don't want to talk about. If you want to talk about DNRs, if you want to talk, something that is important to you, let them pick their topic.
Well, and you've already kind of mentioned a few of them, and I find it interesting, the last one that you mentioned. So DNRs is something that a lot of times the community doesn't necessarily understand, and they never really think about how it's going to affect them. But you go out and just say, hey, this is what's going to happen. And talk to those senior centers or large groups, small groups to large groups. And now all of a sudden it makes our role that much easier. There's no, well, why aren't you doing this or doing that? Because these things are just they already understood.
And
Exactly. Same thing with cardiac arrest management. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, because I was going to tag on because I'm sure you'll have a comment on this. What the community doesn't know, even in the healthcare side, like the clinical side, I can't tell you how many people may not know in a particular hospital system that EMS may work a code for 20 minutes and then do a no transport because that's their policy. And the hospital systems and the nurses and the physicians may not even know that. So if people in the healthcare system don't know it, then when you're at somebody's residence, they're not going to know it either.
Yeah, and a lot of times, especially in rural health, they get a bad rap, and especially volunteers, because they don't want to do a lot of things that are new because somebody told them to do it without giving the reasoning behind it, and nobody has told the public that we've told for 50 years to call 911 and we'll, lights and sirens take you to the hospital, that we don't do that anymore, that we bring the hospital to you, that the best interest, for example, in a cardiac arrest management is for us to take care of the patient in your home. And the best place for them to be if they do not, survive is in your home so you can deal with whatever has to be done, not, a $20,000 hospital bill, under cold license steel. We have not taught people, we expect people to do these things without giving them the tools to, or the public, the tools to understand what we're doing. So we kind of, shoot ourselves in the foot with, hey, this is a great idea. We understand the medicine. This is evidence-based, whatever, but we don't pass it down to the boots on the ground or the public. And that's where we have the opportunity to bridge that gap.
So what is the most effective way that you have found to go about getting the buy-in from the community, allowing them to come out and reach out to, groups or neighborhoods or what?
Well, here's where you run into a problem. It has to be consistent. And maybe the first, time you offer a presentation, you have 5 people, and maybe it's 3 people, and maybe it's the same people that just want a coffee and donuts. You have to keep doing it. I hear this all the time from rural agencies. Oh yeah, we tried that. Oh yeah, we tried that. And my answer is always, how many times did Michael Jordan throw the ball? So same idea, little different place, little different technique. It takes the average person like something like 3 to 5 times to see something in the news or on TV. It might be changed by now, but it used to be before they start to pay attention even. So, they're doing themselves good by doing this and practicing it. And eventually, if you keep throwing stuff out there, those ducks are going to come in and they're going to keep coming back for more. So it's really consistency and sticking with it, picking just the things you're really secure about and then starting to ask the public, what more would you like to know about? And then satisfying their needs. That's very rewarding, to be able to fill that need.
So
I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
no, I'm perfectly good with that. So, we're going to empower, EMT Nancy to go out and do this. And, part of that too is that positive feedback loop as well, taking that into the community and say, hey, you only had 3, but it's not that you only had 3. You reached 3 people today, and that's good. If you see them again, it's even better because that means they're buying in and you're helping the community. And so it's one of those things that we definitely need to change the, I'm just reaching or I'm just doing, it's like, the conversation, I'm just an EMT. No, you're a healthcare professional doing great things. And hey, this is helping our community.
Exactly. I mean, if you just look at what the AHA has done with their PSAs in terms of humor, they use zombies, disco. There's a whole bunch of things to make people pay attention, and they're all teaching the same thing. It's just a different way of going about it, and it gets people interested. It lightens the subject matter up because let's face it, in EMS, most people don't want to think about EMS. It's like your spare tire. You hope you got one. You hope it's not flat when you need it, but you really don't think about it a whole lot. And you don't want to buy a new one. So, that's our job to fix that problem, and make sure that we're not a donut.
I think there are further implications for retention strategies. I found that because the people that kind of magnetize or gravitate towards EMS have a particular personality. And so that idea of ownership. And so I guess my idea is they know that you're going out in 2-guy teams, 2-person teams, doing small group stuff. And that's awesome. They're doing these little missions. They're doing medical trauma response and all that. And they're responsible for their rig. This is their call. This is their patient. But beyond that, if they can extend that influence and have more ownership in, I guess, the whole process entirely, that might actually make them want to stay on board a lot longer than just go search for somewhere else. Because we all know that eventually some of that passion or some of that can start to fatigue over time.
And I agree. And I'll tell you, we've been teaching a pretty substantial high school EMR class, 120 hours this year, and very poor area. And we've been very successful with it as long. But the enthusiasm that's there, these kids generally, they're like in the 93, 94% across the board. The class is achieving those goals in an area where they don't have a very good initial education system. And they are going out into their communities and helping, and they're so excited about it. And my concern is always they're going to hit, that ambulance ride, and some burnout is going to just, pop their bubble. So we can inoculate them, with enthusiasm while we have them. But I think starting them when they're young and getting more talk out in the community will get the right people who want to help people, not just be, glory hounds or siren chasers or whatever, that you want to call them. I think the more the community understands the ability of EMS to help, whether it's a mental health crisis, whether it's an addiction issue, you don't have to be a paramedic to do those things. And creating public awareness and making a small difference in your community is just going to open up, the door for a whole breed of different kind of people to get into EMS. And I think when people come in for those reasons, then they can get the kind of satisfaction from, I hate to say the small calls because there's no small calls, but the non-traumatic, 100-mile-an-hour calls, if they get satisfaction every day when they go to work by making a difference, you're going to retain people. That's just a fact. That happens across the board in every kind of organization.
Well, and I think you kind of made a point right there as well that, you don't have to be going 100 miles an hour to save a person. In fact, if we, the thought that's in my head right now is technically based on all of this, if we are going 100 miles an hour, if we are running lights and sirens, chances are we haven't done something well enough somewhere else to keep that from happening, or hopefully keep that stuff from happening. So, if we shift this, yeah, we're going to be taking people to the hospital, but chances are we have a better chance if we've done the work beforehand.
Well, and think about the opportunity for funding. So you have these little meetings and you have people as they leave, you shake their hand, thank you for coming. Here's a little survey. Could you fill this out? Take 2 minutes and leave it with us. And you collect a pile of constituents that now said, thank you so much. I learned so much from you. I want you to keep doing this. So you're creating your own proof of impact. So when you go looking for, financial support, whether you're just a little volunteer agency or whether you're a nonprofit or even, a for-profit agency that in an area where the demographic doesn't allow you to be profitable, you have right in your hand without doing task force and, all kinds of other things. You have a pile of people that have your back right there. It's just, I'm a keep it simple, stupid person. So, it's just is kind of a no-brainer.
So if you had a top 10 list, I know you said let your people pick, but if you had a top 10 list going back to your service earlier and said, hey, there's 10 areas that I think we should work on right away. What do you think those those top 10 would be?
For what education would we prioritize?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah.
Well, this is a rabbit hole that I could go down for about 4 hours, but I won't. Diabetes education for sure. About 80 million people are walking around in this country pre-diabetic and are unaware of it. So that's a whole other show where I think that should be a vital sign that we check everybody. But that is something that we can certainly provide an opportunity for people to get a glucose check, and if it's a little high, come back and do it again. You can go and tell them they can go to Walmart and get their A1C checked for $15 without having to go to the doctor. And at that point they should, if they get a bad, if they're asymptomatic and they have bad numbers. But you can teach people that in 5 minutes, and you can save them from a lifetime of not just, type 2 diabetes, but the hypertension, all the other things that follow diabetic, the side effects of diabetes. So that'd be my first one. I'd also teach them especially about cardiac risk management. Now, CPR, they're learning in school, people are getting better about it, but how it really works, how that you're not going to hurt anybody, that kind of thing. Take the fear out of that, CPR, that kind of thing. I'd work on that. Stroke recognition, to stop the bleed for sure. 40% of people that have hemorrhage and trauma could be saved if someone knew how to use a tourniquet and had one. Our kids will walk out the first week of class with a SWAT tourniquet and some other things. So even if they don't finish class, they know how to use a tourniquet if they come across the opportunity. That's the kind of thing we need to get out there. Addiction is another story. I'd probably bring in an expert and let them talk, that kind of thing. Especially the DNRs, the fact that CPR is not an answer for ordinary dying, all those kind of things. There's so much we could do. This is, I could be on my soapbox all night about this, but the opportunities are endless. When you have kids.
What would you say?
I was going to say even, bring somebody in, bring a state trooper in that's trained in, car seat safety or whatever, anything like that, a bike rodeo, helmets, I could throw statistics at you all day, but I'm sure that kids that wear helmets have like only a 20% chance of having a severe head injury compared to people that don't. It's just crazy numbers, and people get lax about it, especially in rural areas where they're out on the country road or here with the ATVs. I mean, I shudder when I watch, 10 kids in the back of a pickup bouncing down the road, little kids on ATVs unsupervised. They just don't know until somebody gets killed. So or injured. So there's so much we could teach people.
And you're talking about, and especially, I do think that since EMS does need to progress a little bit further in our generation in a way that maybe other healthcare providers don't, because everybody knows what physicians and nurses and nurse pracs and PAs do, but people don't know about EMS. But like David was pointing out earlier, we have a lot of free ways to put that information out. Social media, Facebook might be antiquated for some of the younger generation, but TikTok and Instagram and some of the other ways. Do you have any other techniques or strategies that you've seen work besides just the typical, social media stuff?
I honestly think that we're at the part where we need to do live things. We need to set something up. People are starving for human contact, for human interaction. They want to get out and be around other people in an environment that they know is safe. And, if you're alone, it feels, go sit by a restaurant, by yourself alone is one thing, but to go sit in a meeting or a class and meet your neighbors that you don't know or other people in your community and learn something together. I think the opportunity for that kind of that social engagement live is underestimated, widely. So we're so used to now Zoom and doing things on social media that we forget that especially older people, the senior citizens, I'm getting there too. I can't stand the isolation, but there's a lot of people, moms, a lot of people that would like to come out and meet other people. And you're giving them an opportunity to feel comfortable coming by themselves, getting a coffee, sitting down, talking to other people and learning something. And so like I said, there's so many stones that you could hit. I think that obviously we all use social media and know how to do that. So that's something that has to happen is reinforcement, and it will reach a wider span. But in a local community, having something, an agenda, that is people know what to expect, when they can go, a place to go is kind of, I hate to say AA, but it's like a social thing that you could create for your community.
That's a good point, because I was thinking about something like here in Middle Tennessee, there's a strong incidence of human and sex trafficking. And so it would be interesting if EMS partnered with a human and sex trafficking specialist or a human and sex trafficking awareness service. Like there are plenty of organizations, religious affiliations, churches and stuff that I think it would be really cool to just partner with and say, hey, we're going to be good about identifying these things and do a public outreach like that. Something that people may not be fully aware of and engage with.
And I'll tell you, you can go straight to FEMA and they have everything blocked out for you. They have all kinds of education for EMS and for the fire service with all kinds of facts. I mean, it's plug and play. So you can take those things. Human trafficking is one of them. Driving an ambulance safety, how to be safe. All those kind of things are already done for you. It doesn't cost anything. And you have accurate information that you can pass on to the public, and kind of learn something yourself, as well. So I think that there's, especially human trafficking, people think of it as just sex trafficking, but there's all kinds of stuff that's going on. There was a big incident in Connecticut with that, with a guy that had been doing this for 20 years out of a hotel that he owned, and he was a volunteer, EMS lieutenant or something like that. So it was, it's in places where you don't expect it, and awareness is the key to pretty much everything. And then beyond awareness, we need to teach people, okay, now that I have the awareness, what can I do about it without putting, for example, human trafficking, that person in any more danger than they're already in? So we can teach them simple things like that. And as I said, you can go to all kinds of resources that already have this stuff done for you, the work done.
Sorry about that, taking a drink. So one of the things, this time, just a cup, not what you think there, Bradley. You always give me a hard time for my mason jars, but
5 o'clock somewhere.
I like what you were mentioning there, that we don't have a lot of these processes have already kind of been put into place. we can look at our sister services and law enforcement and fire, even public health and public safety. And this is where we can tie large groups together, but we can also look at all of those other resources. But one of the things that I'm going to go into, and I'm going to kind of approach this going to the leadership side now. Obviously, we know that the primary funding matrix for most EMS agencies are transports. And so if we get into the role in which we start to educate the public and may end up ultimately decreasing the total number of transports that are out there, why as a leader should I accept or even move into this realm when I know it may have an impact to my overall budget?
Well, here's the thing, what and this is another rabbit hole I could go down, but what you're looking at is a workaround. We're still working around the fact that funding comes from transport, and that is something that just needs to stop. EMS needs to be reimbursed for the cost of readiness. So sit down this is what I tell people in rural areas. Sit down and say, you have 1,500 people in your community. That's a tiny little community. Some are even smaller. For $250 a week, multiply that times 52 weeks out of the year. How much does that get you for your agency? If everybody in your community, don't talk about taxes. Don't talk about it costs $500,000 for an ambulance. Talk about, would you be willing to put $2 or $3 in to make sure that we can keep doing the good work that we're doing, by not keeping people out of the hospital, and keep it at the community level, because that's where it's relevant. And I don't think there's too many people that are going to say, $2 or $3 a week. You'd have to find a way to make it work, whether it's an add-on to your water bill, whatever it is. There's ways people do it all over the country. But I think you empower the community to keep you working. And even if it's, a for-profit agency, they still need to keep the lights on. They still need to, keep people employed. They still need to buy their 4x4s and medications and whatever. So, don't hit them with big numbers and talk about taxes and all kinds of stuff like that. Talk about what we're doing for you, and is a couple of dollars a week for each member of your family worth having that happen, and make it relevant.
And I really do like that this is where we as EMS leaders have to kind of get out of our comfort zone, our comfort box, and re-engage and have the new conversations. Yes, reimbursement is the way it currently is, but are there different ways that are going to be beneficial to help? And ultimately, when we take a look at it, it is better overall for us to keep people out of the hospital. It keeps more of that money into being spent. If somebody knows that they have to go to the hospital once a month and each one of those hospital visits is going to cost them X number of dollars, they're not going to spend X number of dollars. So theoretically, things will turn out and increase those capabilities. So as leaders, we need to kind of embrace that and empower those members. And I think we've kind of talked through a few different ways, but ultimately, as an organization, we can use this as Eric mentioned, as a retention tool, or as we've discussed, but also recruitment. It's like, hey, you're not just there to transport individuals. This is a good recruitment tool now. It's like, hey, come here and we're going to empower you to actually do something about health in your community.
Mm-hmm. And it lets people kind of get their feet wet too, without worrying about, their first call being, the unimaginable thing that you don't think you can handle. You get some time out talking to people, even if it's taking vital signs, talking about different disease processes, getting comfortable with your own understanding. And then, that just is going to translate into being a better provider, when the situation arises.
And I think when you build that competence, you build the confidence, and it will come with it. So I think if you also are recruiting people, if high schoolers or even somebody who just got out of high school or someone who's just returning from the military or maybe a mid-level or mid-career change, they see EMS people interacting with the community in a real way. They see it online, they see it at community town hall meetings or whatever. They may get more interested in being like, I want to be a part of that process because it's beyond the patient. And two, like, let's say we want to do diabetes education. That's actually a really big deal. I know a lot of hospital systems are really hooking onto that and COPD right now. I can't tell you a hospital system out there that would not talk to somebody in EMS. If somebody came up to them and said, hey, listen, I'm blah, blah, blah. I would like to do a diabetes education to try to help these people out. I can't see a hospital system who would not provide them resources, training, or information. So yeah, this is a really good way to not only build a recruitment tool, but also an education tool. Have you seen that happen in your experience with that?
In terms of the hospital systems, well,
just in terms of like getting resources and stuff. When someone presents this and says, "Hey, listen, I got this idea to help educate the public." I mean, have you seen anything like that? It doesn't have to be hospital systems.
To some extent, the problem is usually follow through. Everything sounds like a good idea, and what you're saying and the way you just said it is exactly what has to happen. Even when I talk to, like, say, legislators, anybody will say, "Well, you bring me all your problems, but you're not bringing me any solutions." So you take something like this. This is what we'd like to do. We know that it's a problem for you as well. These are statistics in my community. They're probably pretty readily available. And this is how I think together we can fix that. I see that being, I mean, how do you turn that down? Exactly, like you just said. Again, it's a win-win. That's how CPAP, became mainstream in EMS. They realized it was keeping people out of the hospital and costing insurance companies a whole lot less money to do that. So we could do that with a whole bunch of stuff, but we can't, like David said, we can't like cut off our own, food stream either. But that's a whole nother issue in terms of not depending on transport fees. But I think that has to happen at a local level, and that's a whole nother, again, I could spend hours doing this. So.
And this is where I think, Nancy, you made that reference to kind of the rural area. One of the things that rural providers have found is because at times they're kind of out on their own little island because their population may not be high. They're out away from the urban centers, but they have a significant amount of land, so they may be geographically separated from some of these different places. But it would be good to network and just reach out and say, "Hey, what has worked in your area?" and learn, because as you've made mention, there's so many different tools and resources out there, and while some of the ones from FEMA may not seem like they fit your area. Again, going back now to Service Director Nancy, may be in her community, and she's been able to tie that to how that is, and they can pass it on to you. And just because it doesn't look like on the surface it may work for you, you can kind of pull it apart and see how it does. So this is where we need to lean on our mentor groups or our networks to say, "Hey, how's this work?" So, All right, I want to kind of give you the first step to wrap us up for this evening. We've talked a lot about how we are going to be utilizing basically all of our resources. This is going outside of the box and thinking new. So just kind of give us your final thoughts on the topic, and go ahead.
Well, I'm going to say something again that's probably fairly unpopular, but it generally, my experience has been that EMS has a problem for every solution, and we really need to get past that. So these are things that we can do. These are things that you can, explain as a service chief to your own organization, that you can take to whoever is, whatever, kind of, whether it's a council or a mayor, whoever runs your town, say, how can we work on this together? And it all should work kind of seamlessly eventually. So I think that we need to do that. And I think we need to talk to educators. We've got a lot of burnout educators out there too, who are just telling more stories and telling more stories. And it's got to start at the beginning with the education and getting people excited and getting people to understand compassionate care and so forth, and that how much of the job is not going to be directly saving a life, that you may see in front of you. I think that starts in the classroom. And I think that we have to then go up to make sure that those excited, compassionate, educated providers don't, get beaten down once they join a service, and that is going to take leadership to have to say, I need to take a better look at my people and see who are my mentors and who are the people that I want representing, my company to the community, because what that representation is going to get you what you need. You've got to get people, not just their minds, but their hearts. And that's what we do with this kind of thing. It's just, as I said, it's a win-win-win.
All right. Since he's been quiet this whole time, I'm going to go to Bradley and get his final thoughts, because he hasn't said darn near anything this evening.
No, I think we've got to do a better job of, kind of like Nancy said, is don't look for the problems, but get out here and work with the community so they understand what we do. And there's a lot we can do to educate the community that we haven't done.
Awesome. Eric.
So I realize administrators have a lot on their table, and if any of them are listening to this podcast, they can be like, yeah, it's easy for you guys to say that. I have all this stuff I'm dealing with. However, you don't have to. I mean, that's the great thing about this. This is something that you can give off to, like what she was saying, an EMT. If you have some people who are getting degrees, higher level degrees, or they're just wanting to further their education and training or whatever, they can get into stats. They can do needs assessments, and they can partner with different institutions like community colleges and universities and all these different groups that are more than happy to help you probably study any problem that you want to study and give you the tools to do it. So for administrators who are like listening to this going, man, that's all pie in the sky, it's really not. And if you're a brand new EMT or an AMT, there's help. Like, this is a great way to start engaging with our profession in a real way that may open up future doors and future opportunities for you down the line. So I think this is a great tool all around.
Yeah, and I think if you're an administrator, again, and this goes down a whole nother rabbit hole, there's administrators and there's leaders. So, some are both. If your people are not, who are your most important asset, aren't where you're spending your time, you're not going to get this done, because it means you have to understand it, you have to believe in them, and you have to give them those tools to succeed. Somebody else can do the number crunching, and you just, have them put it on your desk. This is a leadership thing that I, constantly focus on. Other people can do the minutia. What people need from a leader is the leader. So, I think it might make people less burnout as I guess I don't want to use the word administrator or even manager, as people who are in leadership positions could probably enjoy, get back to what they started with, making people excited, helping people learn, helping people be better. So they have to be able to let go, though. They have to let go something else that they're doing so that they can get these things done and help people get these things done.
All right. We'd like to thank Nancy for coming on and bringing this topic, really the details and kind of just how this will impact us overall. So Nancy, definitely thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge and your passion for the topic.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
All right. And so for all of our listeners, we like to thank you every week, but without your feedback, we do not know what you're thinking. So make sure you go by and visit our website at EMSHandoff.com. Also visit us on YouTube under the EMS Handoff. You can find all of our videos and engage with us there. And certainly support our podcast partner, Jim's, by going to Apple, Spotify, and Google, finding theirs, subscribe, rate, and review. Let us know how we're doing and what you're thinking as well. So, and don't forget to go out to the Pursuit Company and find all of our EMS Handoff gear for whatever meets your needs. Well, I know we're hitting spring, but still in the hoodie tonight myself. Just all kinds of great products. Pursuit Company is a great company to work with. So help us support them. So go to pursuitoutfitters.com/EMS Handoff, and you can find all of that gear there. So on behalf of my co-host, Eric McCullough and Bradley Dean, this is David. Take care, stay safe, and always remember the value of your EMS Handoff.